Hey guys, welcome back to Vidsvale Custom. So today we're going to start a new work in progress introduction series sponsored by Garagekits.us Colors. They were kind enough to contact me and see if I wanted to do another series. This is their Denizens of Zo Air Elemental Avia Bust. This is their larger version, and they also sent over a bunch of paints. Even though I have a lot of Garage Kit color paints already on my shelf, they sent over a bunch of colors that I would need for this item. So in this series, we're going to focus on, prepping your kit, getting it ready, going over, cleaning, setting it all up, and also painting it up. Now, a lot of new people to the hobby might not really know that there's a lot of prep work to be done. So that's kind of what we're going to do. They do have a smaller scale version of this, so if you're not into the larger scale, they do produce a smaller version. And they also have a 1/6 scale full figure of this character as well. So since it was sculpted in 3D, they were able to cut out the head and make a bust version. So if you're new to the hobby, or you've been into the hobby for a long time and you want to kind of like get more into painting facial features and have fun with it, that's kind of what this whole video series is going to be about. So we're going to really focus on a lot of painting. Even though I do a lot of customizing and I like to tweak a lot of items, there's really not much to customize on this. The only thing I think I'm going to do for my only personal preference is I'll probably go over to like a hobby store or to like a Michael's, and I might buy just hoop earrings, or maybe if I find some really cool looking earrings, maybe I'll add that onto the item. It's only kind of a personal preference, it's just what I would like to do for my own little take. But we're going to go into the studio. I'm going to break down the kit, show you all the parts, how it's all pieced together. And then after that, we're going to focus on how you clean up your kit. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about priming your item in primers. Just get people a little bit understanding how, priming works. I think sometimes people think that, cheaper primers are going to save you more money when they cause you more issues. But other than that, we're going to focus on the paint work for this item. Now, the good thing about the hobby and the good thing about painting is you don't need to do exactly what is on the box or what the producer intends or what other people are painting up the item. The good thing about this hobby is you can see this character and you can paint it any way you want. Now, yes, it is the Denizens of Zo Air Elemental, so if you want to keep the Air Elemental theme, you can go that route. But if you feel that this character is, okay, maybe she's not an Air Elemental, maybe she's something else, or maybe she's supposed to be darker skin or lighter skin or even blue skin, you can do what you want on your kit. You don't always have to do what other people intend to it, and that's the fun thing about the hobby. So to give you guys an idea of the way I envision this, I think this character would be a little bit more darker tone, like maybe a tan type of character, and then the hair would be more of a blonde or a lavender hair. And I think the eyes would be more of like a grayed white out eyes type look. I got a couple ideas in my mind, and we're going to go that route. Now, as far as the jewelry goes and stuff, like the horns, I'm thinking of doing like old worn horns. And then as far as the jewelry, I'm kind of more of a fan of silver. I'm not really a fan of gold or anything, but maybe I might do a little bit weathered gold or metal. I don't know. We'll kind of see how things go. And then, of course, we're going to have some fun with the base and everything else. And we'll kind of just go over some techniques and stuff, how I would paint it. And try to keep it simple, but make it look good at the same time. So this way, anybody that's new to the hobby can jump right in and not worry about saying, okay, you're supposed to throw on 30 different colors for skin tone and do this. You can just go with a couple colors and it could still look good, as long as you blend and keep everything going. So with that being said, I think it should be a really fun series. I really like this kit a lot. It's an amazing sculpt. And so what we'll do is we'll go over to the studio now, and we'll kind of go over the kit. We'll talk about how we prep it up, get it all cleaned up, and then we'll focus on the priming. And then I think after this video, we should be pretty much done. In the next video, we could probably dive into painting. Alright, so we're in the studio, and what I like to do first whenever I get my kits is look them over. I like to see what's going on with the kit, what's involved, how much prep work is needed to be done, what materials I'm going to need to, get this situated, and we'll kind of go over that now. So like I said, this is geared to a lot of new people in the hobby till we start painting. So if you're new, I'm going to kind of break down things of like how you prep your kit and what to look for. So, looking at the hair, I could tell this is probably a two-part mold. And if you can feel it like on this edge here, there's sort of like something hitting my fingers, like it's like sharpness areas here and there. Going around this edge here, especially over here, there's a little bit of gunk there. And if you go around here, you can sort of feel another one. Especially if you look right here, there's sort of like a little bit of a split here. And then over here, there's a little bit of a split and a little gap there. That's flashing because this hair is a 2-part mold, and a 2-part mold looks like this. So this is a head sculpt I customized for an item. So what it is you make 2 parts of the mold, you close your mold, you rubber band it together, you pour in your resin, you let the resin cure, you open it up, and you pop out your item. Now, looking at the head, I could tell this is probably a 1-part mold. Unless it's 2 parts and they hid the one seam amazingly, I think it's 1. So when I look in back at the head, sort of coming down the hair around here, I sort of see splitting of the hair, like around here, especially when I rub my fingernail like right there. I sort of see splitting, and it's kind of like a line. And then if you come down here, you can see it really down here, around here, going down around here, and then over in here. So that probably tells me what it was is this is in the mold, but what they did is they split the mold here, and they just split it like that, and they pop out the item and they close it. So this part is solid, but this part just opens up. So I think what they did is they had the mold and they split it open and they pop out the head like that. I think. Because I'm not really seeing anything around this area, which is absolutely amazing. Now, there's a little bit of gunks in these little areas. So whenever you have detail in an item like this, what happens is the more and more you cast, the more and more you make, the more your mold deteriorates and gets stuck in areas. So if you have tiny little gaps, so you can see there's a little piece like a bubbling right there. There's a little tiny bubbling over in here. And then right here, there's definitely a bubbling with actually pink mold stuck in it. So what happened is, there's probably an air bubble or something here. And when they pulled out the mold, that mold ripped into there and stuck. So that right there has got to be taken out. So that'll happen from time to time. And the more you cast the mold will happen. But other than that, it's a fairly good clean kit. And it looks good. Now as far as the base goes, you could tell this is a 1-part mold, because over here you got a lot of air bubbling at the bottom of the base. Now that's not a big deal. If you don't care about the bottom of your base, which I really don't care most of the time either, you can just kind of clean this up and leave it as is. But what I'll probably do is give this a sanding, get some, vacuum out any of the bubbles that are kind of like filled in with like the, sand of the dust from the resin. And I'll get a, mix up a little bit of Bondo, and I'll squeeze Bondo around the item and just fill it in, then sand it back down and have a flat base. Because if it was a 2-part mold, you would probably destroy a lot of this detail around the area. So imagine they put this in a box like this. They poured the pink mold on top of it to look like that. And then what they do is you flip it over, you pour in your resin, and boom, you pop out your base. What you do is you pour in resin, boom, you pop out your base. So that's how this probably was casted up. Now, as far as the earrings go and the stuff, there's probably the same thing. You can see there's little flakes probably hanging off the earrings and stuff. So that's just some flashing stuff we got to take care of. But like I said, I'm probably not going to use the earrings. I want to probably try to have a little bit more fun with this, so we'll see how that works out. So the next step is, once I get an idea of like everything that's involved, this is a very clean kit. There's not any kind of bubbling or any issues around the face or the body or anything like that. So we're ready to go. What you want to do is one of 2 things. One, if there's a lot of sand work and you want to do that first, do that first. If there's some really bad flashing, you could go into the garage and sand that down, which is fine. But before I do any putty work and before I do any kind of like repair work or customizing, I like to wash my kits. Now, some people use 99% alcohol to wash their kits down, which is fine. Some people use degreasers. I personally like to just make up a nice warm bath or water in the sink and put a couple of drops of Dawn in there and use a toothbrush and just get in there and really like brush out the item. What that does, it gets out any kind of, if they use mold release, if they used any kind of other, maybe baby powder, whenever they did their molds. So you got to imagine the molder makes the item, whether they use mold release or baby powder, they handle the item. They pack that up, they send it to the producer gets everything ready together or whatever, they handle the item, you get the item, and you start handling it. So by then you probably have a lot of finger oils all over the item. So you want to make sure you're nice and clean before you do any priming work. Because I like to prime my items, because that helps me actually see some errors here and there. And then what I'll do is I'll go in with Tamiya putty and do that stuff. So we'll get into that later. So I think the first thing I'm going to do is we're going to go in the garage. I'm just going to get out these little bubbles areas, because I don't like those in there right now because that'll get stuck with, you know, maybe any kind of soap. So we'll go clean that out first. Off camera, I'm just going to go and wash the kit down with Dawn. Basically, wash it down, dry it off, get it nice and clean. And then what we'll do is we'll come back and we'll probably start doing some putty work, getting some stuff cleaned up, probably prime it again, and keep going from there. But I'll explain primers, how we're going to set this up and get everything in this video. And then probably the next video we're going to dive right into painting. Alright, so I'm in the garage and I'm going to get ready just to clean up these little spots before I wash down this item. So really a lot of the tools I use is a Dremel tool. I have tons and tons of different Dremel bits. Anything that's small enough to get into this area without destroying the rest of the area is a great bit. Anything larger, I have a, you know, larger Dremel tools, so definitely stuff to make your life a lot easier. Now, whenever I do sanding or chopping, I wear safety goggles and I wear a mask. If I do a lot of chopping, I have a shop vac next to me, and I always use the shop vac to suck up the dust as much as possible. So I don't chop up my items or sand my items in the house. I always do it in the garage only. So basically I would normally have the shop vac going next to me, and I would kind of Dremel this out so all this dust is coming into there. Now in your shop vac, you should have a bag and a filter if you're doing resin chopping. If you just have a shop vac that's just sucking in dust into the container without a bag, and then you go to clean that, that defeats the purpose, because if you have to pour out that dust, it goes everywhere and you're breathing it in. So you're best getting a good shop vac with the bag and make your life easier and to protect yourself. So as far as this one goes, I really don't need to go crazy with the shop vac because I'm only doing 1 or 2 spots, so it's kind of just showing you what's going on. So let me zoom in a little bit. Hopefully I can give you guys an idea. So this Dremel tool is old, but it still works for the purpose. So let's kind of line up to where we need to go. So basically this little spot here with this little resin, all I do is kind of kick it on. Alright, so I broke off that piece. So if you have an X-Acto blade or something, you can try to get in there and pull out this rubber, if you can. See? Pop that out. Got that piece, so boom. Alright, so that piece is cleaned up. So we go over here to the next spot. Right in here. Alright. So got that little bubble done, and there's one little bubble over here. You might not be able to see it in the camera, but I'll hit it with the tool. Okay, so I got that one out. So like I said, it wasn't that hard. I'm just looking to see if there's any more I missed. Not seeing it. You should always look underneath here too, kind of look around your item. So we're looking pretty good. I think I got all the bubbles. Now if I missed one, or if I have to go back, I could always go back and do it. But there we go. Alright. So there we go. I popped that out and that's all clean. So now I'm just going to go in and get this washed up, and then we'll come back and we'll talk about priming. So I am all done washing up the kit. It's very important to make sure your kit is dry before you do any priming. If you're not careful, sometimes water will bleed underneath the nose nostrils or around over here or inside the ear or even in all this necklace stuff. So then when you go to prime it, what happens is the primer, if it's good primer or thick primer or whatever, it might go over that little bubble of water. And then what happens is when it cures, it'll cure like an eggshell, and then inside that water will evaporate too. And then when you go to paint it, that little piece will break off and flake. Especially if you do a really nice paint job and then you do some masking and all of a sudden you hit that area and then you lose all that detail. Now, I'm not saying it's going to have a big bubble on the cheek, but it might be bubbling in certain little tiny crevice of areas, what makes it's just a pain. So just make sure your item's dry. What I like to do personally is sit there the night before I go to bed or close up shop, wash up my item, get it all nice and clean, and then set it aside and let it dry overnight. It's just one of those personal things that I like to do, and it just makes life easier. Now, as far as her eyes, don't worry about her eyes. The reason why they're blue is I was kind of messing around with a blue pencil before, just to see where like the irises would go and how it would look. Just a personal thing I do sometimes. This blue pencil won't react to anything. I use this on drawing on all my customs to help where I'm going to do stuff, so we'll go over that later. Now, one of the things about primer is when we get into the garage, I have a priming booth set up. We'll kind of explain that tomorrow. Is don't skimp out on primer. Garagekits makes a nice primer you can use to the airbrush. So if you don't have a priming booth, or something you don't want to do outside in the cold, and you have like an airbrush booth in your studio in the house, his stuff is really great through like an airbrush. So sometimes I use their stuff, or like say you have a little head you're going to paint for a statue, you can use their primer through an airbrush, prime it, and then paint it. For this project, I'm going to be using my go-to primer, which I use for everything, is Duplicolor Filler Primer. The gray primer from them I use for customizing, so this way I can use my blue pencil on it and I can kind of draw it and see what's going on where I need to make marks. The red oxide I use for kits like this one. Personally, I don't care about the color of primer because the way I paint, I do good coats of paint on top of it, so I don't like to see the primer showing through. So for me, for my project, it doesn't matter what primer is on the item, as long as you have something that bonds to the resin and that the paint will bond to that. You don't really want to paint over onto your resin because acrylic paints sometimes react and don't go on and stay on. You should always prime your item, period. Don't skimp out on primer. Don't go to the dollar store and buy a $1, $2 can of primer. I've done that in the past when I first got in the hobby, and what happens is my item would stay tacky, and even when I paint acrylic on top of it, the tackiness and chemicals seeps through the acrylic, and then that layer gets tacky. And then when you try to seal it, that stuff reacts to it. So honestly, in my experience, if you're going to try to save $3 or $4 on primer, don't get yourself a good primer. Garagekits makes great primer through the airbrush. I think Duplicolor out of all my years is the best primer for all my stuff. It goes on smooth. It sands great in water. I've never had a problem with any cracking or tackiness. The only problem is sometimes if you go to the store, it's close to like $10 a can or more, but if you order it online, you could get it cheaper and then go pick it up. That's by me. Maybe other areas they're cheaper, but it all depends on where you go. I know there's a lot of other brands out there. There's Krylon, Rust-Oleums. I know there's Tamiya cans of primer. There's Hobby cans of primer. Whatever primer you use, if you've been in the hobby and you used it for a long time and it works, that's fine. But if you're new to the hobby, honestly, don't skimp out. If you're trying to save a couple of dollars on materials, you kind of get what you pay for. So, like I said, if you're working on a small item, like say you get the smaller bust, you don't want a can of primer, Garagekits makes a nice primer through an airbrush. If you're working on larger stuff and you want to use a can of primer, I recommend Duplicolor Filler Primer or regular primer they have. I think their stuff's amazing. The Krylon, a lot of people use that. That's fine too. The Rust-Oleum, I'm not a fan of. I find that Rust-Oleum primer, it takes like days for it to cure, and it does not go on smooth and everything. Also, if you're going to use a can of primer, whichever can you do decide to use, do not spray in super cold weather outside. Primer does not like cold weather. It will bleed on you. You would think that it wouldn't bleed, but it doesn't dry right and it just bleeds down your item. So you need to have a good temperature wherever you spray it. If you're going to spray your item outside on a nice day, if it's windy and you spray your item and you're doing it outside in the backyard, what's going to happen is pollen, dust, leaves, whatever might blow onto your item, and then all of a sudden you got, like, on one side of your item you got all this stuff caked up on it. So build a box too. But tomorrow we're going to go in the garage. I'm going to show you my priming booth that I made for priming only, and then what I'll do is I'll have the heater on and we could get this primed up, and then after that we can start working on filling in the back, seaming up all this stuff here and there. We could start planning out how to attach everything, get this base done, and then hopefully we'll be able to close out this video, and then the next video we can really focus on painting it. So prep work is the majority of most kits. Prepping, planning, engineering, adding magnets, pegs, whatever you need to do is a lot more work than just sitting there painting the item, at least in my experience. So, but this one's a simple kit, so there's really not that much to do, but it's just all making sure you have the right material. So let's let this dry for tonight, and then tomorrow we can prime it up. So I'm in the garage now. I got it nice and heated up. I got my mask, even though I have a priming station, like basically it's an airbrush booth in my garage. I still wear a mask anyway, just in case. Pulled out a brand new can of filler primer because the other one was kind of empty. So make sure you shake it up pretty well. What I like to do is just kind of kick it on and make sure I'm getting a good even spray. Sometimes you might get a can that's like splattering or it might be defective, so just test to make sure first. but it's looking pretty good. Sometimes if your cans start to if they're on the shelf for a long time, they get caked up at the bottom. It might kind of splurt out and not go even, but this will get pretty good. So let me throw on my mask. We'll kind of spray this down. Get it all nice and coated up. So I'm just going to keep going through all the pieces like this. I'm going to kick the heater back on. It just gets a little bit noisy for the camera. And I'm just going to do a couple more coats, let it dry. And then just keep going throughout all the pieces until I get a decent setup. Now I put her in the base only because it's easier to stand her up and get a nice coating on it. But I'll have to pop her out of the base and get some areas I can't get at this angle. So I just did some putty work on the back here. It's nothing really crazy or exciting. It's Tamiya gray, basic gray putty. You can use any other putties out there you like, whichever works. I like the gray putty because it's really good for any kind of a flashing, so I use this rubber tool. It's like a rubber paintbrush for sculpting. Had it for years. Basically, I just go around and spackle it. I just squeeze it out a little bit and spackle it, squeeze it out. This stuff is not really good for spilling in like a great big bubble like this. It's more or less for like little tinier bubbles and stuff. So that's kind of what it is. And also a reason why I like to use the filler primer is if there is any kind of bubbling and stuff, this filler primer, when you sand it down, it's like a thicker, dusting, and that'll help filling some like really tiny bubble areas. And then if you spray it down again with a primer, you kind of lock all that in place. So it's really good stuff. Now, the reason why I do all the priming first before I do any of my sanding is I could find errors a little bit easier. So there is a little bit of the flashing here with this hair. There's a little spot over in here. You can see there was that seam line coming down here. Now I don't have to worry about the seam line here because it's going to get hidden in the base. So next step is let this Tamiya putty dry up. It takes, right now it's pretty much almost set, but I usually like to give it like a good 20 minutes, go eat some lunch, come back, and then I can sand it down. What I'll do is I'll probably go into the garage and kind of do some, spackle work on here with some Bondo, just to kind of fill this stuff in a little bit better. And then the way looking this over, I thought I was going to attach her to the base like this and permanently now and then paint her up, but I realized it would be a nightmare to try to get into this like little crevice here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave her separate for painting now, and then when I'm ready to start working on the base, we're going to do sort of like a paint and attach at the same time. We'll go over that down the line to show you how I really would lock this base in here permanently without, having it wobbling like this. It'd be pretty easy. So yeah, so as right now we'll let this dry up, and then we'll get into the garage, go over some sandpaper, sand this stuff down, hit again with some primer. I'll probably go in and wash it. I'll do like a wet sanding, a very light wet sanding in like the sink. Make sure there's no like anything gunked up anywhere. And then there we'll probably be ready to start painting. So all I did was took my Dremel tool and I just went here and I just popped out all these bubbles and I got anything out of there. There was a lot more bubbles in the center here, so I kind of filled all that in. So all I'm going to do is take some Bondo all-purpose putty, mix them up, spackle it on, fill in those areas, let it dry, and then tomorrow I can sand it down and have a nice flat surface. The only time I ever use Bondo for any stuff I do is the bottom of a base to level something out or fill it in like this. I don't use this for any of my statues, whether filling in it on the item itself or using it to like patch stuff. I find that the stuff is just too thick. You really can't work with it too well because it kind of gets tacky, and also it stinks to high heaven. I'm not really a fan of the smell, so I'll do this and I'll leave this in the garage for the night, and just hopefully by tomorrow I can sand it down and prime it up and get that smell out of there. I know a lot of people do use this for, their statues, which is fine, whatever you want to do, but personally I find that other products are better for what I do. But cheap stuff, good to fill this in, and then you're done. Alright, so it's time to sand this down. Now, there's really not much to sand on her. Like I said, there's only just the seam back here around the hair. We'll have to fix up this later. And then this was the stuff I did the other day. So base like this, I'm just going to grab my sander, and I'll just hit my sander at the bottom of it, flatten it down, and that's ready to go. These are just regular sandpapers that I have. You know, just go from there. Usually what I like to do is, if I'm going to sand any of this stuff down, I usually like to sand by a shop vac, or if it's a really crazy heavy sanding, I set up the shop vac where I connect it to a bucket. But for this one, basically I'll just kick this on and show you. It's really not that hard. It's just that I don't like to get too much dust all over the place if I can help it. And then I just start using all the other sandpapers, buff it down. So as you can see, this is what it starts to do. So the filler primer filled that area in, and that putty filled in that area. So basically when you run your finger across of it, it's nice and smooth now. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to go off camera. I'm just going to go down the line and do that. As far as the hair goes, it's this is the fine, this is the medium. So as far as the hair goes, what I'll do is I'll find the seam, and I'll kind of just go down the hair like this and see if I can take off that seam. Just kind of run my finger where it's at, like around here. Now you can see this hair is a little bit gunky in here, probably where that seam was. So if you have yourself some sanding tools, you know, you can get these things at like a hardware store. You kind of go into this area, and you sort of just kind of take out that gunky area and sort of build out that hair a little bit more. You know, if you have a Dremel tool that can get in there, depending on what tool you have, you can go in there and clean it up. Like around here, this little part is a little bit gunky right there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in there with the Dremel tool. You know, you got a little bit of a piece here that's kind of messy. So basically I'm just going to go down. It's just tedious work. It's nothing too crazy. Now you can see right here on this hair, there's a little bit of a gunky piece here. So if you grab your little bit more rougher sandpaper, you could kind of, you know, just take that little piece off, as you can see. Now be very careful when you sand stuff. You know, you don't want to sand off any details. So a lot of this stuff is sort of rough. I know where to go with it. But if you were to do like if there was a seam line here, you'd have to go very careful with some of the more like finer paper. So, like say there was a seam over here, you know, you go with this finer paper, kind of like buff it out, you know, and go from there. Type stuff like that. So, you know, I'm just going to keep going around the item like that, in there and there. Now, one of the things I'm going to do, though, is, let's see, we'll grab a marker. So when I'm ready to actually attach this piece down the line, I'm going to do this now while I'm actually like sanding down, because I'm going to get messy. What I'm going to do is I'm going to create hatch marks. So I'm going to take my Dremel tool and I'm going to go make a hatch mark here, a hatch mark here, another one here, here, like this. So let me kick on the Dremel tool real quick by the shop vac. I'll just do one for you right now, just to give you an idea what's going on. So kick this on. And I'm going to do another hatch mark over here, but only in the inside. So, this is kind of the idea, is when I'm ready to attach this later on down the line, right? When I'm ready to, like, say if you're not using putties and you're going to use glue, or say you're going to use liquid epoxy. If this is perfectly flat and this is perfectly flat and you put a lot of epoxy in there, what happens is if you painted these up and you squeeze it in there, if you put too much epoxy, all of a sudden it all squeezes around the item, and then if you try and wipe it off, you might wipe off your paint and it becomes a mess. If you create hatch marks like these, what happens is if you put liquid epoxy in there, glue, or even if you put Avi's Epoxy Sculpt, it goes into the grooves more than squeezes out, and it'll help lock it in a little bit better. So that's why I'm going to do a bunch of hatch marks around there. Now you could do it for the hair too, but for her, I think I'm not even going to really attach the hair at the end. I'm just going to leave it removable because it fits in fine. It's just this piece is wobbly, and I want this to be one solid piece. So that's why it's always good to do hatch marks. And I might even do a couple of hatch marks at the bottom too, but that might be at the end because I might need her to kind of stay flat at times if I'm painting her and I don't want her in the base. So it's just something to think about. But like I said, in here, I didn't do the hatch mark all the way up top. As you can see, I didn't go all the way up top because then I would have made a mark here, and then when you put this item on here, you would see something. But you can also see I didn't go all the way up here with those hatch marks either. So that's something to think about whenever you're going to glue pieces. If they're perfectly flat like this, when you squeeze it together, the glue just comes out. Create some hatch marks, create some kind of like gaps so the glue goes into those gaps and doesn't squeeze out on you. So let me get this sanded all down. I'm going to prime it up again. Then probably what I'll do is I'll probably go into the bathroom, in the sink, and do a lot of wet sanding, get her all prepped up. And then hopefully what we'll do is if I have to do any kind of putty work around here, I'll come back to that. But maybe we can just kind of finish this up video. Hopefully this will pretty much be it for this part. Alright, so I just got out of the garage. I sanded this down nice and smooth. I was ready to prime it up, and what happened was there was a little air bubble over here, and I kind of marked it with some of my red Aves. So there's a little bit of an air bubble there, so I want to build out that corner. Now, I also need to do some customizing on the hair piece, and we'll show you that in a second. So this is called Avi's Epoxy Sculpt. I use this for all my kit building, whether it is sculpting hair from scratch, rebuilding like an arm, fixing fingers that are broken. This is my go-to to everything. You mix A and B together in equal amounts, and you got like a 3-hour work time. It's really soft and durable. They also make a safety solvent, which is kind of a liquid. And basically you can use it as a sculpt with, you can use it to patch stuff with, and then by like 8 hours or the next day it's hard as a rock. You sand it down, prime it, and you're ready to go. So you can see there's a little bit of a bubble here, and you just take some of the saves, just kind of throw it over here in the corner, right, like that. And if you have paintbrushes, which I use for sculpting, a little bit of their safety solvent, you can just pretty much go here like this, sort of build out that corner. Now I'm building outwards. I'm not trying to make it exactly perfectly straight because I'll do that with sandpaper tomorrow. So basically you can sort of see it's messy, but there you go. That is building out that corner from an air bubble, and we don't have to worry about that till tomorrow. Now, as you sand though, sometimes you'll run into some issues. So as I sanded this down, there was a little bit of bubbling here now. So I got this seam out, but then there's bubbling. So that's what you got to do is you got to go back to your putty, grab some of your putty, go back here, and now we got to fill in those little bubbling areas that are kind of messy. And then you can fine sand that the next day, and you get rid of that. So sometimes when you sand stuff, you run into some issues. It's kind of the whole problem with kit building, but it's easy if you just keep plugging away at it. Now, as far as the hair piece goes, see this seam line right here that's kind of messed up? Let's see if we get it. So you can kind of see that's messed up there. See all that texture? I'll never be able to rebuild that texture. I just can't do it. You know, and the one over there, it's just not going to happen. I can't sit there with my Aves or my putty and build out all that texture. It's a nightmare. So to solve the problem with something like this, because you know it's always case-by-case basis, you could take some Aves, putties, whatever you got. Well, even if you don't like this piece here, and say you want to get like a piece of fabric at like a fabric store and you want to wrap fabric around there too, you can do that too. I mean, you know, this is the fun about kit building. You don't have to do all that stuff. But what I'm going to do is take some Aves, and what we're going to do is we're going to cover up those seam lines, but we're going to kind of like stylize it on each side to make it look like this has got some kind of a piece going around it. So I put some Aves here like this. Let's get a little bit closer for you guys. Let's see. Alright, so basically what I'll do is I'll just cut it here like this, X-Acto blade, just kind of slice it off, not a big deal. Get the light on a little bit too, that'll help. Alright, and then you get another little bit of a slice over here like that. so. Slice a little bit right there. I mean, if you want to rebuild the whole thing, you can. You can do whatever you want. It's kit building. So grab your paintbrush, which is here. And basically what I can do is make it look like there's some kind of a clasp or something like so. I mean, it's just a little hair piece. It's not going to make or break the piece. It's not the end of the world. But to be on the safe side, you know, I'm going to have to get in a little bit closer and do some more detailing, of course, with my magnifying glasses and stuff. But you want to make sure you just kind of put your piece up here. Make sure so you can see how it kind of like warped a little bit there. So you might have to kind of play with it a bit. You know, maybe kind of go back in here with the X-Acto blade. Sort of cut some of that out because it's too much. Pull this out. So you can see that I don't really need it that far up there. So what we'll do, we'll just cut it off there, like so. Like that. And then you put it back on here like this. And then you kind of, so it's kind of like creating a little bit of a cool piece for the hair. Not the end of the world. Like so. So I'll clean this up a little bit. I'll get in a little bit closer. But, you know, you're creating something there that you're hiding that little bit of an error. And you're also kind of like stylizing the piece a little bit more. So it's not the end of the world. Now, like say, when you painted it up, maybe you want to put a gem there. Maybe you want to go and glue some gemstones on there. Maybe you want to put some diamonds. Maybe you want to put pieces of metal around there. Maybe you got a cool rubber band or a bow that you want to tie a bow. You know, you could do whatever you want. It's your kit build up. It's however you see fit to hide an error with something like that. So don't think that just because that's the way it's sculpted, that's how it's got to be. Have fun with your kit. But for me, what I like to do is do stuff like this because it kind of keeps the style of the item there, but we're adding a little bit of an item. So I'll add this over there as well to hide this piece. And then that's pretty much where I will do as far as customizing this item. And then hopefully I can find some earrings too. And the next step is get into the bathroom, do a lot of wet sanding, prepping it up, and getting it ready for paint. So let me get all that done. We'll come back. We'll see what it looks like when it's ready for paint. So it's the next day. I went in the garage and I sanded down the corner with this emery board. So basically, you know, you just kind of sand it down and then it buffed it up. And I kind of sanded down and it buffed up some areas with some sandpaper. So emery boards you could pick up at like those beauty stores, or you could pick them up on bulk on eBay. Don't go to a hobby store and pay markup prices on these things. You can get them cheaper if you just kind of hunt them. And they just make life a lot easier if you're doing flat stuff. So, you know, pick those up and go from there. Next step is I'm just going to go into the sink and I'm going to kind of like wet sand this down and kind of buff it out and get it ready for paint. But one thing I wanted to do was, like we talked about earlier, is the earrings. So I have a box of parts here. These are just all little trinkets and stuff I've collected over the years. You know, I told all my family members that I have younger cousins, girls, and stuff like that. I said, you know, if they have anything that they use for doll making or jewelry making and stuff, and you're planning on throwing any of that stuff away, put it in a bag and give it to me. You know, sometimes if you go to weddings, there's little things on the things you get in flowers like they might attach to. So I just tell people, save all those things and just give them to me. Because you never know if you're working on an item and you need to add some gems, some stones, some diamonds, hoops, chains, or whatever. It's nice to have just surplus of just stuff you get from like a hobby store. Now, as we talked about earlier, I wanted to change up her earrings. So I actually went in here before I went to the store to see if I had anything. And sure enough, I had 2 earrings I must have like bought for a project that I didn't use. And I think these work out great. Now, personally, I know I like adding stuff like this to my kits and adding earrings. I know some people would probably say, oh, you know, I wouldn't do that to mine or whatever. But personally, I like this idea because down the line, say I don't like these earrings, or say I'm at like a Target or Walmart and I come across something that looks even cooler, I can pop these off and add something else. I like removable stuff, you know, sometimes. So I like the idea of adding earrings like this. I had to sort of cut the little metal pieces in the back, otherwise it wouldn't fit them. But other than that, it works out pretty well. So I was kind of just like, I think it looks cool. I just think it works out pretty cool with that. It's just a personal preference. So like I always say, it's your kit. You can do what you want. Now, like say you're working on this kit, but you want to do a little bit more stylizing to her. Maybe you want to give her a nose ring. Maybe you want to give her one of those diamonds though for those lips. You know how they put those diamonds, they put them over there. Maybe you want to glue some diamonds on the forehead, or there's all kinds of stuff you can add to your kit and you can have fun. So if you have like a lot of hoop stuff, like these little hoop things, you could sort of kind of cut it and you could give her like a little bit of a nose ring. Maybe you want to add some more hoops around the ear. Maybe you want to give a whole bunch of little stuff around there. Maybe you want to add some diamonds onto these pieces here and stuff. So, don't feel that everything's got to be painted by the kit and the way, they give you. You can add and have fun with all the stuff. So, like I said, I'm going to keep these earrings on for now for the kit. And down the line, if, like I say, I ever go to a Walmart or something and I find some cooler earrings that I think would work better, I'll pick those up and put them on. Now, I did have to sort of cut the back of the little metal piece here because when you put this piece on there, it was sticking out too far and it wouldn't go in. So, sometimes you have to customize some stuff here and there. But I think this should work out pretty well. So my last step now is I'm just going to go into the sink. I'm going to do some wet sanding, buff it all out, make sure there's nothing gunked up on the piece here and there. And then that should be it for the video. So I'm going to close it out now. Next video we're going to come back. We're going to focus on the eyes because I like to paint up eyes first, especially something this size. So this way I don't mess up the skin trying to do it. Then we can mask that off and we can start doing the skin and everything else. So thanks for watching, and part 2 will be coming soon.